The rhythmic clang of weights filled the air, echoing like war drums through a pristine, high-end gym. Everything about the place screamed exclusivity. Gleaming chrome machines, polished floors that reflected soft LED lights, and a scent that mixed eucalyptus towels with high-dollar cologne. It wasn't just a gym. It was a stage where egos flexed louder than muscle, and today the performance was about to take a cruel turn. In the middle of this sanctuary of sweat and vanity, a lone black man moved with quiet focus. Early 30s, athletic build. His presence wasn't loud, but it had weight. Every motion was deliberate. He wiped down his equipment after each set, nodded courteously to those around him, never once raising his voice. He wasn't here for attention. He was here to work, to breathe, to exist without trouble. But trouble didn't wait for invitations. It came in the form of 3 bodybuilders stomping into view like they owned every inch of floor space. Chests puffed, voices booming, their energy was infectious for all the wrong reasons. They laughed too loud, dropped weights like they were slamming down challenges, and tossed out jokes that didn't feel like jokes. The type that had a target. And today, that target was clear. "Hey, this ain't your spot, buddy," one sneered, yanking a dumbbell from beside the black man and tossing it like it was trash. His voice cracked through the gym's ambient noise like a whip. Another stood, in front of the mirror, flexing for no one but himself, then chuckled darkly. "Let's see if he even knows how to lift." The third stepped up, blocking the man's path as he tried to step away, clearly hoping to avoid confrontation. "What's wrong?" he smirked. "Can't handle a little competition?" Their words dripped with mockery. Their tone wasn't about teasing, it was about erasure, dominance, control. And the way they spread themselves across the gym made one thing painfully clear. They didn't believe this man belonged here, not in this space, not in their world. The black man held his composure, calm, head high. "Hey man, I'm just trying to finish my set," he said, voice low but steady. "I wasn't bothering anyone." But his eyes told the real story. Burning with embarrassment, the familiar sting of being called out not for something done, but simply for being. He stepped aside, trying to de-escalate, trying to be the bigger man. But the tallest bully stepped in close, smirking like a cartoon villain come to life. "Didn't know they let everyone in here," he said, the venom in his voice disguised as humor. The others roared with laughter, feeding off one another like vultures in gym shorts. Nobody stepped in. Not a single trainer. Not a single staff member. Gym-goers glanced up, uncomfortable, then looked away. Headphones back on, eyes back down. Silence filled the space between insults like fog rolling into a valley. Heavy, suffocating. In the far corner, sitting on a flat bench, adjusting, a dumbbell like it was any other Tuesday, was Dwayne Johnson. Dressed in a black tee, grey workout pants and beat-up sneakers, he looked like just another gym rat. Calm, focused, unbothered. But behind his eyes, something shifted. He saw it all. He missed nothing. And the moment was coming. Closer, louder. The room just didn't know it yet. The gym's usual background noise, weights clanking, treadmills humming, music thudding softly, began to feel distant. It was as if the whole room had shrunk around one growing pocket of tension. The 3 bullies weren't just making noise now, they were making a statement. And that statement was simple. We decide who belongs here. The black man didn't fight back. He didn't yell, he didn't posture. He bent down, quietly picked up the dumbbell they had tossed, and placed it back with care. He wiped down the bench again, though it wasn't dirty. Every motion was an effort to retain dignity, to reclaim control in a moment trying to strip it from him. His breathing was steady, but the heat on his cheeks betrayed him. He knew this wasn't just about a workout. It never was. The tallest bully stepped in front of him again, physically cornering him between machines. He leaned in close, smile curling with cruelty. "What's the matter?" he taunted, voice syrupy and slow. "Cat got your tongue?" His friend chimed in, barking out laughter. "Maybe he doesn't speak gym etiquette?" The third one shoved a weight off the rack, letting it slam to the ground beside them. The crash echoed across the room like a firecracker. Nobody moved. A couple of gym-goers paused mid-rep, eyes flicking over briefly, then just as quickly away. Some pulled their earbuds out halfway, then jammed them back in. They saw it, they heard it, but they didn't want it to be their problem. The bullies grinned wider. This wasn't about muscle anymore. This was theater, and they had an audience, silent, passive, complicit. The black man exhaled, slow through his nose, jaw tight. "Look," he said, calm but firm. "I'm just trying to finish my workout. Let me be, man." The words were simple, but they came from a place deeper than the gym floor. They carried history, patience, pain, but to the bullies, it was just fuel. One of them reached over, grabbed the man's towel, and flicked it to the floor with disdain. Another gave him a shove, not hard enough to knock him over, but just enough to send a message. "Maybe you're done now," he said, smirking. The discomfort in the room was now tangible. It draped over the gym like a wet blanket. Conversations quieted. A few heads turned, whispers passed between machines. Some reached for phones, not to call for help, but to record. Still, no one stepped in. No one said a word. The tension didn't break. It deepened. As the black man moved again, trying to walk away, the second bully grabbed his arm, spun him around, and shoved him hard into a rack of weights. His body hit metal with a dull thud. "Don't walk off now!" the bully snarled. "We're just getting started." His friend moved to block the other exit path, arms folded, eyes gleaming. "Maybe you need to learn some manners." Suddenly, the gym didn't feel open and luxurious. It felt like a cage. The sounds of treadmills and music were gone. All that remained was breath and weight and silence, until a shift happened in the far corner. Dwayne Johnson stood up. He moved slowly, deliberately, folding his towel in one smooth motion. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't theatrical. But something changed in the air the second he rose. Like the first crack of thunder before a storm, most people didn't notice, but some did. A ripple moved through the room, like energy passing through a wire. Whispers started, low and uncertain. People turned, phones lifted. The bullies hadn't noticed yet, but the gym was about to remember exactly who Dwayne Johnson was. The bullies were too high on their own bravado to notice the shift. The sound of someone standing up, the quiet tension in the room. It didn't register. They were too focused on the man they thought was weak, too consumed with their performance. Then one of them turned, finally catching sight of the large shadow, standing a few steps too close. His smirk widened as he squinted, sizing him up. "Wait a minute," he muttered, voice loud enough to draw his friend's attention. He elbowed the one beside him, nodding toward the looming figure. "Isn't that movie guy?" Recognition lit up the faces of the other two. "Yo, no way," one chuckled. "Isn't that Dwayne? What's his name? The Rock?" The third one laughed. "Didn't think they let Hollywood types in. Real gyms." Their tone dripped with sarcasm, but they weren't scared, not even close. To them, he was just a famous face, a celebrity who looked big on screen, but probably lived behind stunt doubles and camera angles. They saw muscles and fame, but no threat. "Relax, superstar," one of them sneered, waving him off dismissively. "We're handling business here. Go back to your little movie sets." The others laughed louder. The idea that this man, this celebrity, was here to stop them? Ridiculous. To them, he was all show and no substance. But Dwayne Johnson didn't blink. He didn't flinch, didn't raise his voice. His hands were relaxed at his sides, shoulders steady, face unreadable. There was no posturing, no tension, just calm. But it was the kind of calm that made your skin prickle, the kind that said, "You've made a mistake." He didn't engage. He didn't need to. And somehow that silence was louder than any outburst. Across the gym, a new kind of whisper began to ripple. A girl on the treadmill nudged her friend, nodding toward Dwayne. "That's him," she whispered. "That's The Rock." Another guy near the squat rack lowered his phone mid-recording and muttered, "He's actually here." The energy shifted like someone had dropped an electric current into water. Heads turned. Conversations stopped. Even music from someone's Bluetooth speaker faded into background static. Still, Dwayne stood motionless. The bullies kept laughing, but there was a flicker of doubt now. Quick, almost invisible. The kind of unease that creeps in when you realize the room is watching something you're not. But it didn't stop them. The tallest one, puffing up his chest, decided to make a point. "Look, man," he said, stepping in close to Dwayne, smirk still intact. "I don't care who you are. This ain't your business." And with that, he shoved him hard. The gym went silent. Even his friends stopped laughing. Phones froze mid-record. The tension was no longer rising. It had arrived. Dwayne didn't stumble. He didn't even shift. He simply straightened his back, eyes narrowing slightly. Not with rage, but focus. Like a lion watching its prey take one step too close. No words, no threat, just presence. And suddenly, the room understood what the bullies didn't. They hadn't pushed a movie star. They had just pushed Dwayne Johnson. The air was razor thin. You could almost hear the heartbeat of the room. One shove, one disrespectful push, and suddenly all eyes were on Dwayne Johnson. He didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. He just stood there, an immovable force, wrapped in calm. And it was that stillness, that unwavering composure that unsettled everyone watching. But not the bullies. Not yet. The tallest one gave his friends a smirk and a nod, like this was just another laugh waiting to happen. "Let's show him how it's done," he muttered. Then they moved, all three at once. One charged straight at Dwayne, lowering his shoulder like a linebacker aiming to bulldoze. Another swung his thick arm toward Dwayne's jaw with a confidence born from never being challenged. The third crept behind, ready to lock him in a hold, imagining how impressive it'd look with all eyes on them. They thought they were lions, but they had just lunged at a hurricane. Dwayne's body shifted like a machine springing to life. No wasted motion, no theatrics. Just raw, perfected instinct. He sidestepped the first attacker with a calm that looked rehearsed but wasn't. The man barreled past him, too fast to stop, and slammed into a weight rack with a thundering crash that rattled the gym floor. Before the second could even register what happened, Dwayne caught his wrist mid-swing and twisted, sharp and fast. A pop cracked through the room like a snapped branch. The man let out a choked grunt, knees buckling as Dwayne stepped forward and drove. An elbow deep into his ribs. The impact was brutal, audible. Air left his lungs like a balloon burst. The third one lunged from behind, arms outstretched, but Dwayne was already in motion. He grabbed a kettlebell from the ground without looking, spun smoothly, and slammed it into the man's thigh with enough force to knock him sideways. The guy crumpled, groaning, legs failing beneath him. It was fast, it was surgical, and it was over in seconds. The first bully scrambled to his feet, now wide-eyed, fury overtaking arrogance. He lunged again, fist raised high, swinging wildly. Dwayne ducked low, grabbed the front of the man's shirt, and used the momentum against him. With a single pivot, he hurled the man over a bench, crashing him into a pile of dumbbells that scattered across the floor. Gasps erupted around the room. Nobody moved, nobody breathed. Every person in that gym had just watched the impossible unfold. Not the explosive chaos of a movie fight, but the terrifying precision of a man who'd mastered his body, his rage, his moment. The second bully, clutching his arm, staggered up with one good hand. He barely got vertical before Dwayne was on him, one knee driven deep into his core, dropping him again. Dwayne didn't stop. He grabbed a resistance band hanging nearby, looped it around the guy's arm in a flash, and yanked it tight. The Bully dropped, face pressed into the mat, trapped and breathless. The third tried to retreat, stumbling backward toward the mirror, desperation replacing confidence. He swung blindly. Dwayne caught it midair, twisted his wrist sharply, and dropped him to his knees. A quick elbow to the temple and the man collapsed, dazed, disoriented and done. All three of them were now on the floor, grunting, gasping, defeated. What began as a show of dominance had become a public dismantling, and Dwayne, he barely looked winded. The gym felt like it had fallen into slow motion, the noise, the motion, the constant hum of people working out. It had all vanished. Every eye was frozen on the same scene. Three men who once strutted through this space like kings now lay scattered, bruised, breathless, broken, and standing over them like a storm given form. Dwayne Johnson, but it wasn't over, not yet. First Bully, blood rising to his face, desperation now replacing arrogance, forced himself up. He was battered, limbs shaky, but rage kept him moving. He didn't care that the room was watching. He didn't care that his friends were down. All he saw was a man who just humiliated him. He grabbed a barbell from the floor, heavy, steel, dangerous. He gripped it like a weapon, eyes burning, and with a roar swung it at Dwayne with everything he had left. It was his last mistake. Dwayne stepped to the side with a smoothness that made it look effortless, reached out and caught the bar mid-swing, not a block, a grab. He yanked it downward, turned his hips, and swept the man's legs out from under him in one clean, devastating arc. The barbell clattered across the floor. The bully slammed down hard, groaning, his fire extinguished on impact. He didn't get. Up the second one, still restrained by the resistance band, twisted and writhed, trying to break free. But Dwayne had looped it tight and anchored it in a way that made movement impossible. The more he thrashed, the more stuck he became, like a fly caught in a web. Sweat poured from his forehead. He wasn't fighting anymore. He was just trying to escape. The third bully was already crawling, one arm pushing against the floor, knees scraping as he tried to make it to the exit. His head swiveled, looking for a path out. Anything. He didn't care about the crowd, about his pride. He just needed to get away. But Dwayne was already there. With one long stride, he stepped in front of the man, cutting off the escape like a wall had just appeared. The bully froze, looking up with wide, terrified eyes. Dwayne didn't speak. He didn't yell. He simply reached down, grabbed the man by the collar, and with one arm hauled him upright. Then with a final devastating punch, sharp, clean, full of purpose, he dropped him cold. The man hit the mat with a heavy thud. Silent. Still. Around them the gym held its breath. No one dared move. No one dared speak. Phones were still raised, recording, but hands were shaking now. What they'd just witnessed wasn't a fight. It was a dismantling, a public reckoning. And Dwayne, he was steady, calm, breathing evenly. His shirt clung to him in the way it always did after a real workout, not from the heat of rage, but from control. He wasn't huffing. He wasn't pacing. His movements had been sharp, calculated, without waste. The kind of violence that wasn't about anger, but justice. He glanced briefly at the chaos around him, 3 bodies strewn across the floor like discarded ego, and rolled his shoulders as if loosening up for another set. But there was nothing left to do. The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't clap. They just stared. Because every single person in that gym knew, without a shadow of a doubt, they had just seen what real strength looked like, and it had nothing to do with the size of your biceps. The gym stood still, like time had stalled. Every treadmill had stopped, every rep paused mid-motion. And in that thunderous silence, Dwayne Johnson stood tall, surrounded not by applause, but by the weight of what had just happened. The bullies, once loud, once so sure of their dominance, now lay sprawled across the mat, stripped of every ounce of bravado. No swagger, no smirks, just pain, fear, and the beginning of realization. Then Dwayne spoke. Not loud, Not aggressive, just firm. Get up. The words weren't barked. They didn't need to be. They carried more power in their quietness than any shout could have mustered. The first bully stirred, groaning, one hand pressed against his ribs as he tried to push himself up. His legs wobbled. His pride was in pieces, but he obeyed. Slowly, awkwardly, he climbed to his feet, eyes darting, avoiding Dwayne's gaze like a child caught in the act. The second and third followed, bruised, limping, barely upright. They stood not like men, but like shadows of who they'd been. Just minutes earlier, the room watched, dozens of eyes locked on them, phones still recording, whispers now a constant hum. No one was laughing anymore. No one was cheering. It wasn't entertainment. It was truth. One of the bullies, his voice cracking, mumbled under his breath, We're sorry." But Dwayne didn't let it slide. He shook his head once, the gesture sharp, unwavering. "Look at him," he said, nodding toward the black man still standing near the machines, tense but breathing, eyes wide, heart pounding. "Say it to him." The bullies turned reluctantly, almost like they were being dragged by invisible chains. Their voices were weak, cracked, stripped of all confidence. "We're sorry, man," one said, barely louder than a whisper. Another followed, "Shouldn't have disrespected you." The room stayed quiet, not out of awkwardness, but out of awe, because in that moment, the gym didn't just witness a fight, it witnessed accountability. 3 grown men forced to look their victim in the eyes and acknowledge their cruelty. The kind of reckoning that doesn't happen in movies, but just did right here, in real time. The black man nodded once, slowly. He didn't need revenge. He didn't need more words. Just that moment of justice, of finally not being alone in it. He stepped forward, meeting Dwayne's eyes. His voice was quiet, almost breaking. "Thank you," he said, his breath hitched. "I didn't think anyone—" He couldn't finish, but he didn't have to. Dwayne gave a single nod, solid, grounded. "No need for words around them," he said. The message wasn't just for the man in front of him. It was for everyone in the room. Every bystander who watched, every silent witness who now had a mirror held to their own inaction. Across the gym, the atmosphere shifted. What started as passive discomfort was now something else entirely. Respect, realization, a quiet understanding that they had all just been part of something bigger, something real, the kind of moment you don't scroll past, the kind that sticks with you, that forces you to ask yourself, what would I have done? But for now, no one moved. No one dared break the silence that Dwayne Johnson had earned. The silence that lingered after Dwayne Johnson's words wasn't empty. It was heavy, weighted with realization, the kind of silence that demands you pay attention, that forces you to feel something. The 3 bullies, once towering figures of intimidation, now stood small, bruised, hunched, and visibly shaken. Every trace of mockery had been stripped away. The man they targeted, still catching his breath, now stood taller, not just because the bullies had backed down, but because he finally wasn't alone. Across the gym, the ripple effect was undeniable. People who had frozen mid-set now leaned forward, phones still up, but no longer just for spectacle. The woman on the treadmill pressed pause. A man near the cable machine slowly took out his earbuds, no longer pretending not to see. 2 personal trainers behind the front desk exchanged stunned glances, realizing too late they should have intervened, but didn't. A teenager in the corner whispered to his dad, "That's The Rock." His voice was laced with awe, not because of Dwayne's fame, but because of what he just witnessed. It wasn't just the brutality of the fight, it was the clarity of it. The power, the restraint, the purpose. One guy near the squat rack muttered, "He handled all 3 of them like nothing." A woman nodded, adding, "Didn't even raise his voice." Another voice chimed in, "That wasn't acting." Recognition spread like a quiet storm. Everyone now knew what had happened wasn't just a fight. It wasn't entertainment. It wasn't about muscle or reputation. It was about something deeper, something that had been bubbling beneath the surface of that gym long before the Bullies made their move. And Dwayne, he wasn't basking in the attention. He didn't strut, didn't acknowledge the stares or the praise. He simply bent down, picked up his towel from the bench where he had left it earlier, and slung it over his shoulder. Then, without a word, he turned and began walking toward the exit. The crowd parted for him instinctively. No one dared stand in his way, not out of fear, but out of respect. They didn't want to interrupt the moment. They didn't want to diminish it with noise or ego. He walked straight down the middle, as if the gym had turned into a quiet hallway of reflection. Heads turned as he passed. Phones followed, but no one called out to him. There were no high fives, no, "Yo bro, that was sick." No one dared treat what they just saw like a viral stunt, because it wasn't. It was a message, and everyone had received it. Dwayne's back stayed straight. His gaze never shifted. He didn't need to explain, didn't need to wait for applause or validation. The doors slid open ahead of him, and he walked through without looking back. Behind him, the gym began to stir again, slowly, carefully, but it wasn't the same place anymore. A few gym-goers returned to their machines, but their eyes were different. They moved slower, more thoughtful. No one spoke about sets or gains. They talked about what they just saw, about what it meant, about how close they'd come to letting something terrible happen, and how one man stopped it by simply refusing to stand by. In the far corner, the black man returned to his bench press. This time, when he picked up the bar, his hands were steady. His chin was lifted just a bit higher, and no one dared get in his way. The doors closed behind him with a soft hiss. Dwayne Johnson didn't look back. He didn't have to. He left behind no wreckage, no ego, no chaos, only silence and a room full of people who would never forget what they had just seen. Inside the gym, no one moved right away. The air still carried weight. The tension hadn't disappeared. It had transformed. What unfolded wasn't just a fight. It wasn't some viral stunt or cinematic beatdown. It was a moment of reckoning, a lesson, one that landed harder than any punch. People began to process it, not the choreography of the confrontation, but the message buried beneath every precise move. Strength isn't found in flexed muscles or booming voices. It's not earned by dominating others or commanding attention. Real strength is silent, controlled. It's in the man who says nothing until he must, and acts only when others won't. The Bullies, once larger than life, now sat on the edges of mats, nursing bruises and avoiding eye contact. Their laughter, their arrogance, their bravado, it was gone, replaced by the cold realization that they were never strong, only loud. Across the gym, the black man was no longer invisible, not because of what he did, but because of what someone finally did for him. His presence, his discipline, his quiet dignity was no longer overlooked, and maybe, just maybe, some of the people watching would carry that awareness into the next time they saw something wrong and said nothing. Dwayne didn't need the spotlight. He didn't pose for cameras. He didn't give a monologue. His strength wasn't about dominance. It was about principle. He acted, not because it was dramatic, but because someone had to. He didn't fight to prove a point. He fought to protect. A man who couldn't in that moment protect himself. That's what made the difference, not the damage, not the technique, but the purpose. Because the strongest people don't seek recognition. They protect without asking for thanks. They move without waiting for permission. And when they walk away, they leave behind more than silence. They leave behind change. Strength isn't about who can lift the most or shout the loudest. It's about who steps forward when others step back. Today, one man showed us what it means to protect, not for praise, not for power, but because it was right. If this story made you feel something, anger, pride, hope, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video, Share it with someone who needs to be reminded of what standing up really looks like. And drop a comment below. What would you have done? Make sure to subscribe so you never miss the next story that could change the way you see the world. Because heroes aren't always on screen. Sometimes they're just a quiet presence in the corner, waiting for the moment to do what no one else will.